Better hold on, bro.
Alright, let's see what this thing's got.
You can put it over here.
We're just test driving this BMW.
Nobody around, bro. I get pulled over on foot.
Nobody's gonna
Ready?
pull over a mom car. Oh shit! Well, I definitely felt some cheese on there. We should do a reaction video on this thing, dude. That felt pretty good.
I'm telling you, dude, this truck is no joke.
Yeah.
If you guys watched our last video, you'll see that I removed the front mount intercooler because I was having issues with my AC, not wanting to blow cold air anymore. I went to side mounts. And today on my way home from work, I noticed that the AC was still blowing the same. So I connected my manifold gauges, which I have here. And I checked the pressures on the cooling system. So from my understanding, you want your low side in the green range, and I had it somewhere in the middle of the yellow. So what I did was I released some of the pressure on that side, and the AC started to blow slightly colder, but it still wasn't good enough. So what I did was I added a shroud. I'm not sure how well you can see it. I added a shroud to the bottom of the car. And then I added another one. It's under the nose panel. So what it does is it basically forces all of the airflow through the condenser. And the cooler your condenser is, the colder your AC is. I also have a modified evaporator. There is a throttle suction tube, or TSV, something like that. It basically makes your AC system run cooler. You do run the risk of freezing over your evaporator, so I'm always like keeping an eye on the temperature. Earlier I was playing around with you know, like a cooking thermometer, a digital thermometer or whatever. And the lowest recorded temperature that I picked up was 26 while cruising around. And at that point, I decided to turn off the AC system altogether because I didn't want it to freeze over. I don't know the consequences of freezing over. Maybe it just stops blowing cold air. I really don't know, and I don't want to find out. The other thing that I was doing was I was playing around with my headlights. So for the longest, when I rewired the front of this car, I never really did anything with the high beams. I always drove around with the normal low beams. I do have HIDs in those. And for the high beams, I had some LED. I think they're like 55K. They're kind of white. I just had them laying on the shelf, and I was thinking, you know, my low beams aren't that bright and I don't have high beams, so why not throw the LEDs in the high beams, and worst case scenario, drive with them both. So here's what I did. So those are the low beams, and these are the high beams. When I had the LED high beams in the low beams, they weren't as bright as the HID lights, so that's why I removed them and they sat on the shelf. I don't know if it's because the LEDs are more effective in the housing where the high beams are, and it just wasn't efficient in the projector side of the low beams. I don't know, I'm not an expert with lights, but I did notice that the LEDs, I did notice that the HIDs were a lot brighter than the LEDs. So what I wanted to do was have them work together. And I wanted it done in a way that when I'm just cruising on the road, I can just, you know, turn on my regular low beams, and if I have to just function like OEM, turn on the high beams, but I want both to turn on. So what I figured out was all you have to do is I added a ground here, and you connect it to the ground for your regular low beams. And what that did, when your high beams are on, your low beams are getting ground, which will allow them to turn on simultaneously. So that is only with the low beams on, and I'm gonna turn on the high beams now. And now we have both of them running. The other day I didn't have my SD card to be able to film for you guys. Crap. But a few days ago I installed a Blitz Dual control turbo timer. It's basically a turbo timer that also has a built-in kind of boost gauge. It sucks because it reads in HKPA, you know, some kind of fancy Japanese metric system or conversion system. Basically what you do to convert that to PSI is whatever number this gives you. So this was kind of like one of our last peaks. You multiply that by 14.5, which is 1 bar, and it gives you your boost level. The cool thing that I like about this is that it stays stored even when you turn off your car. The one thing that I don't like about my Innovate gauge is that it does store the peak, but as soon as you turn off the car, it basically resets it and it goes back to 0. Whereas this one stays on, it stays stored. The other difference that I noticed was the Blitz Dual turbo timer reads about almost 3 psi higher than my Innovate gauge, which leads me to believe that I may be actually boosting higher than what I previously thought. I don't know for sure. I mean, I don't know which of the two units is more accurate. Would a mechanical gauge, like a mechanical boost gauge with a little needle, be more accurate than a digital one? The other thing is the Innovate gauge is tapped into the intake plenum, whereas the Blitz Dual turbo timer is tapped into the balance tube. So basically what I've been wanting to do is have something to reference both gauges, and basically what I'm gonna do is I have this digital tire inflator, and this part right here, it's kind of rubberized, so I'm gonna put my compressed air up to it and see how much air pressure we have right now. So basically what I'm gonna do is now I have something to measure how much air I'm blowing out. And what I want to do is remove our reference line from both of our gauges. And now we kind of, so we can get a baseline of which one is more accurate. So you can see the car is turned on. This other one, I'm gonna go ahead and erase it. It's back to 0 now. And what I'm gonna do here is blow compressed air into the reference line for the Innovate gauge, and it should record the peak boost. Well, it should, but we've got some boost leaking into the out of our system. So what I'm gonna do is clamp off the opposite end of the vacuum hose so we're not bleeding any pressure, and try it again. All right, so we're not leaking any boost anywhere. And now we're gonna check our peak boost. So our peak is 31.5, which is about 1.5 psi lower than our gauge. And I'm gonna try it one more time. Okay, so we're still blowing out 33 psi. Now what we're gonna do is the other gauge. So this vacuum line is going to our turbo timer gauge, and we're gonna blow some compressed air into it and see what kind of readings we get. I'm gonna hold it for a few seconds. And check our peak. So we have 2.19. So what we want to do is 2.19 times 14.5 equals 31.7. So they're both fairly identical. So our discrepancy in our ratings basically is that one is attached to the intake manifold and the other one is reading off of our balance tube. I would assume that the directly to the intake manifold will give you the best readings, but it seems that our balance tube actually gave a higher reading. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Should I put it on the balance tube and go with the highest recorded number, or should I leave it on the intake, which may only get readings from one bank, whereas the balance tube's purpose is to kind of, it doesn't work that great, but it kind of distributes, it tries to equalize both banks. If you have more experience in that area, you know, feel free to fill me in. Thanks for watching, guys, and if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please hit it. Also share the channel with your Z friends, you know, spread the word, and thank you for watching our videos. Peace.